Geoff Wilson and sports card investor team have decided to open a card store. This is pretty interesting because the store itself is not tiny. It looks like it's going to be quite massive, and they're looking to challenge themselves quite a lot by, promising the world, I guess you could say. Now, there's a few things I'll talk to here that people have asked me to. I wasn't going to talk to this in a video, but people want to hear my thoughts. There's some things around, what this means to the hobby long term, right? Is this going to be detrimental to the traditional offerings we're getting within this hobby? There's a few other things around, relationships with Fanatics, and then also just generally, what's sort of happening within the global economy right now and how this is actually going to, unfold. Before I jump into all of that, right, I should clarify up front, I think this is pretty cool from Geoff. Now, a lot of people don't like him, but I think when you've got people trying to challenge themselves like he is in this instance, I think you have to respect that, right? One of the things that Geoff has copped a lot of hate for over the, years is that he doesn't know a whole lot about cards, right? People say that all the time, but one of the saving graces for him was that he always stuck around, unlike a few people like Gary Vee, etc. So is that the lesser of two evils? Maybe you can have your own thoughts on that, but I like the fact that he stuck around. I like the fact that he's put out the content that he has, and by that I mean the level of quality he's putting out, right? Maybe not so much the things he talks about all the time, but just the fact he's sticking around and shows that he wants to be here. This is another good example of that, of him wanting to make maybe a living out of the hobby, which he sort of already has, but take it that next step further and try and change, the whole card shop experience as well. Now, some people won't like that, but I think you at least have to give the guy credit for trying. But this is interesting for a few reasons, because I can't recall if I mentioned at the start, it's going to be a 14,000 square feet, location. It's not small. This is a big store. And if you watch the YouTube video where they're doing a walk around within the empty store, you actually get the presence of how big, 14,000 square feet actually is. We don't measure in feet here in Australia, but even just seeing it empty, it just looks insanely big. This is not a small, half-assed attempt from him and his team. This is a big deal. The thing within here that I think is very interesting is their messaging to want to basically fundamentally change the hobby as a whole. They want to basically allow people to visit Cards HQ every single day, no matter where they're located in the world. And the way they talk to that is a first of its kind live shopping experience. Now, me, being here in Australia, people in Asia, Europe, etc., will really like to hear this because, in our locations around the world, we don't really have too many card stores. And that's a huge untapped market for this hobby, for this industry that's not, realized yet, right? They're sort of being taken for granted when so much money is being spent in those parts of the world, that if they can be targeted and sort of given more opportunity to buy and sell cards, I think that's going to do a lot of positive for the hobby long term. Now, this doesn't do too much to get cards in hand quickly of people or allow you to, move cards quickly, similar to like what you're doing via eBay and things like that, or ComC. But what it does give you the opportunity to do is interact with a store, because the way I think this is going to work, this is how I'm interpreting it, and this is how I like to see it work, is by me reading this, you'll be able to walk the shop live 24 hours a day. That tells me that basically they're going to have staff working there literally 24 hours. So if you're somebody that's in another country or in another state and you want to check out what inventory they have that came in that day, as an example, I'm assuming this means you can, log on to either a live streaming platform, Fanatics, whatnot, something else maybe, and interact with the staff member and say, this is what I'm interested in. What do you have within the store? Or they can take you around and show you the showcases and things like that. I think that element is really cool, and that's something that we need to see a lot of hobby shops, tap into, because like I said, the hobby is a lot bigger than North America, right? And if you want the hobby to go to that next level, right, and you want to try and maximize, the collectors and get a lot more buzz around it, similar to what we saw within the boom where people were spending money left, right, and center, you need to tap into these other regions that are sort of not getting the shop experiences that they deserve, right? And could this be something that falls flat? Sure, but just on face value, those are my thoughts, and that's why I'm sort of excited to see what happens here, irrespective of what your thoughts are about Geoff, yourself. But this is an interesting one, because I saw a story today, or yesterday, I should say, from AOH Sports, who had a comment around something from Mario Alejandro, who was somebody that I've spoken to on the channel before. He had somebody give a comment basically saying, I bet there's some backing from Fanatics testing the market for what a brick and mortar operation looks like. And this is a piece here that I think could maybe scare people long term about what the card shop experience is going to look like, because you've had Michael Rubin basically come in and say, I love this, let's go, we can't wait to help and support you. I would be shocked if there's not already a partnership in the back end with, Fanatics. It would make a heck of a lot of sense for that to be, the case. But the question here and the detriment to the hobby long term is, well, what does this actually mean, for the traditional card store? Does that mean that we're going to see more of these things pop up and traditional card stores, disappear? Because Fanatics is going to want stores to do exactly what Geoff Wilson is doing here, which is fine, right? There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But as we've talked to you before about, people wanting the old crummy local card store to die, there's something, about that experience. There's something about walking into a card store and smelling the smells that you do, or interacting with somebody that's owned that shop for, decades, right? There is something to that. There's a piece to that makes the hobby that much more enjoyable. And, if we're moving towards, fancy, sneaker style stores, as been talked to in the past, that concerns me a little bit as well. Like, I think it's really cool to see these new stores come in and give us new opportunities to collect and bring innovation and challenge and change the way things are done for the better, for the experiences us as collectors. But there's a charm to that local card store that I hope is not lost with this sort of stuff. And I hope it's not Fanatics, using this as the test case for what everything should look like, right? You need that balance of stores that are trying to do what Geoff is trying to do, and then, your traditional local card store. And that's me getting on my high horse, sure, but that's just my thoughts on how I think the hobby should work. Now, I'm just one guy. I'm really keen to get your thoughts on that as well, because my opinion is my opinion, but I just think we need to protect both sides, right? There's a charm to the hobby that we need to make sure is not lost, right? And that needs to stick around. And I hope that this is not, an early sign of Fanatics trying to get rid of that charm. Now, one other thing that I saw today from AIH Sports is this video here where he's talking about, is Sports Card Investor Card Shop a risky bet? He talks in his description and his video that he wishes Geoff the best of luck, same as, I do. But he basically talks to, the issues going on with the global financial system and where inflation is and where cash rates are and essentially where interest rates are landing, and how, a lot of signs are out there that a recession is incoming, specifically associated with, another housing crisis where people have really high interest rates that they can't afford to pay, especially in parts of the world where fixed interest rates are only a few years, like here in Australia. That's going to trigger, pretty much a downturn. You might see a lot of businesses close, right? And that's all speculation, right? But that's the way things are looking. So the fact that you've got Geoff coming out and saying this is a $3 million USD investment in a time that's probably going to be quite an uncertain period for, businesses and homeowners and people in general, right? It's going to be interesting to see whether he has the liquidity to sort of keep that business alive, right? It's not so much just the fact whether he's going to have enough cash on hand to create this business. It's going to be whether you've got people wanting to spend the money on sports cards if a recession does come, right? And again, I wish him all the best. I think it's pretty cool what they're trying to do, as long as Fanatics don't try to make that the new norm. But I just thought some of the comments in Raul's video was pretty interesting, because you've got some people talking about, not just the fact that you might not have people wanting to spend money if a recession was to happen, like it's looking like it is, but also what's going to happen to other stores, right? Is the plan that, Geoff has factored that in, and the way they're sort of planning to sort of bypass it is that because they've got so much backing, they're hoping that a bunch of other local card stores collapse so they can take the inventory and the customers and essentially have the central store, maybe. But you've got other people here talking about, being a bad time to open a store. Like, obviously Geoff is a businessman. You can argue whether you think he's successful or not, but he has the money. He's probably got connections to people to make this sort of sound business decisions and all that sort of thing. But it's just, an interesting one for that reason, right? Are we going to see, customers turn away? Because like the first comment basically talks to, as much as I admire the concept and design of his new card shop, I think he's severely underestimating how bad this hobby is currently in. More than half of all my hobby friends that I've made since 2019 have either lost interest entirely or simply lost a lot of money. Now, that is essentially confirmation bias, because, I think if you talk to most people, if you've made friends, from 2019 onwards, a lot of those guys are probably people that just entered it as part of the boom ride and they're already gone. So that's going to be the same for most people. But I'm keen to hear your thoughts, right? Because from my own personal perspective, I've definitely seen less spending at card shows here in Australia. I've definitely seen less traction on my eBay store. I've definitely seen less traction in the vlogs that I do watch. So we've obviously got, a downturn, right? So is that going to be something that impacts, Geoff's ability here to run a store? It'll be interesting. I think, he's going to get enough traction based on his, influence within the hobby and his connections with Fanatics and, content creators. His store is going to have the buzz around it. I think, he'll be fine, but I'm keen to hear what you guys have to say as well. I know this was a bit of an all over the shop video, but in summary, I think it's a really cool thing. I hope Geoff can challenge the status quo, because I'm all for that stuff, right? I talk to innovation and disruption all the time. I want, the value that we get as card collectors, as customers within this industry to be better, right? Too many businesses have taken the piss with the value they give us, whether that's a grader, manufacturer, authenticator, they all take the piss, right? And card stores fall into that as well. So the things that we've seen from Fanatics, lately don't fill me with a lot of confidence that what they're doing is going to be great for the hobby long term. Something like this where you're trying to change the customer experience, I think is pretty cool. So we'll see whether it comes to fruition or not. The other piece that I think some people will find interesting is I'd be curious to see, some of those cards that Geoff has sold that people have given him shit for. Maybe this is a way for him to write them off within his business as well. So share your thoughts, and I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.